Senator Larissa Waters is the Greens mining spokeswoman and she's also one of the committee members. She joins me now from Brisbane. Senator Waters, this report looked at coal seam gas in the Murray-Darling in the areas that take in fields in south-western Queensland and the north and central west of New South Wales. Now, recommending a moratorium on new developments in those regions would be quite a dramatic intervention. Do you think it's likely?
Well, look, we are absolutely thrilled at the report's recommendations for a moratorium in parts of the areas where we're seeing coal seam gas trample on our landscape. It's about time, frankly. We've had all sorts of scientific bodies saying that we don't understand the long-term impacts of coal seam gas. We've had the community up in arms about the threat to our food production and our groundwater. So it's just wonderful that finally we've had all parties sign on to this Senate committee report and recommend we press pause until we really understand what the long-term impacts are.
But it's one thing for a committee report to make a recommendation. It's quite another thing for it actually to be put into practice.
Look, that's right. The government's now got 3 months to respond to these recommendations, and look, we are really hoping that the government chooses to uphold them. Certainly the Labor members of the committee did sign on to the report, and these recommendations are desperately needed. Now, I've got 2 bills in the Senate that would actually fix many of the problems that were identified by this report, so I'm hoping that the government, at the very least, strongly considers actually backing our bills and addressing the dastardly issues that we've got with coal seam gas on our landscape.
Now, is the major concern the amount of salt that's produced as a byproduct from coal seam gas? Is that the concern in prime agricultural areas?
Look, that's part of the concern, Kim, and the other concern is just the sheer volume of water that coal seam gas takes out of the landscape. We've got amazing underground water systems and we don't yet understand what's connected to what. So the fear is that when you punch a hole in an aquifer in order to get the water out so the gas can flow, you're dewatering that aquifer. And we don't know what's connected and what's not, and you may actually see a long-term drop in the groundwater table, which means that many of our farmers won't be able to grow their crops and feed us and the world with. So the concern is both with water and with salt, Kim.
Now, a very contentious issue has been the one of access to land. What has been the committee's recommendations on whether or not coal seam gas companies can access properties?
Look, there's a reasonably strong recommendation in there, Kim, but I think it doesn't go quite as far as I think it should. We've got a bill before the Senate that says farmers should have the right to say no to coal seam gas, because when there is such uncertainty about the long-term impacts on water, farmers should be able to say, hey, I don't want to take that risk. I want my kids to be able to farm this land in years to come if that's what they choose. So our bill gives quite a clear right to farmers to say no. The recommendation in today's report is a little bit more nuanced and says that farmers should at the least know who's going to come onto their land when, to deal with some of that huge intrusion that we've heard about across Queensland and New South Wales, and to make sure that they can plan their farming activities so that they won't be interfered with. So that's a welcome step, but it doesn't go far enough as we think it should go.
Now, tell me a little bit about the recommendation to set up this trust that would be funded by coal seam gas companies.
Look, the concern is, Kim, is that the companies will pack up and go after about 30, maybe 50 years when the wells are all exhausted. And who looks after the abandoned wells then? Now, we took evidence in the committee that the cement may well degrade, and we may well see that drop in the groundwater table that I spoke of earlier. And the problem is, who's looking at that? Who's monitoring that? The companies are gone, so it's left to the public purse and to the government to do that. Now, that's not fair, given that the companies have potentially created the problem. So the recommendation, which is a very good one, is for a trust fund so that the company can put some money in to basically cover that monitoring program after their operations are finished. So that's a really good precautionary measure to make sure that we're still watching in years to come to make sure that long-term damage isn't going to be done to our groundwater systems. And if it does start to happen, then at least we can try and fix it.
Okay, Senator Larissa Waters, thank you very much for filling us in on some of the report's recommendations.
My pleasure, Kim.